There are experiences that remain clear long after other memories have softened around the edges. Our encounter with Phidias Jubal was one of them. We had fled Arabic with Commander Kroll behind us. For 3 days and nights, he pursued us through the forbidden zone. When we finally crossed into a small neighboring province, we hoped only for somewhere to rest until Kroll gave up the search. Instead, we were arrested. That was how we came to spend 2 miserable days in a strange jail, each of us confined in a separate cage. We were given enough water and plain food to keep us going, but little comfort and no explanation. The cages were stacked like crates beneath a harsh light, and our jailer seemed to regard the whole arrangement as perfectly reasonable. His name was Phidias Jubal. At first, none of us understood what he wanted from us. By the time we did, we were already playing his game. Chapter 1. The Court of Phidias Jubal. Hal Sterling was awake when the others began to stir. June shifted painfully in the cage beneath him and asked whether everyone was all right. Gina complained that her back was stiff. Trace said that at least he now knew what it felt like to live in a zoo. Smith, with admirable concentration on the essentials, announced that he was hungry. "Let's ring for room service," Trace said. The joke earned little more than tired smiles. Then footsteps approached through the darkness. Phidias Jubal entered the pool of light surrounding the cages. He was a small, round, bald man in a perfectly proper 3-piece suit, complete with a pocket watch chain and a bright red tie. His manner was so cheerful that it made their imprisonment seem even more peculiar. "Good morning." "Good morning." Smith peered at him. "This is morning?" Jubal rattled a ring of keys. He had good news, he announced. The judge had arrived, and court was in session. Hal stared at him. They had been waiting 2 days, and nobody had even told them what they were accused of doing. "Patience," Jubal said happily. The cages were opened, and the Sterlings were led into what looked less like a courtroom than the private study of a wealthy eccentric. Dark wooden shelves covered the walls. Books rose almost to the ceiling. At the center stood a desk so enormous that it seemed capable of surviving a naval battle. Jubal invited them to sit and said that the judge would be with them presently. Then he disappeared through a door behind the desk. A moment later he returned, standing stiffly. "All rise. The court of the Honorable Phidias Jubal is now in session." He went out again. The Sterlings looked at one another. After a suitable pause, Jubal swept back into the room wearing judicial robes. He seated himself behind the great desk with an expression of solemn authority. Hal could scarcely believe it. "You're the judge?" Jubal appeared surprised that this should matter. He produced a large sheet of paper and began reading the charges with obvious pleasure. Entering a province without permission, damaging private property. When Trace protested that they had damaged nothing, Jubal calmly added disrespect to a provincial judge to the list. Smith asked for a lawyer. Jubal dismissed the idea. Lawyers, he explained, were an unnecessary extravagance. Representing oneself was much more fun and considerably more challenging. Gina protested that they had done nothing wrong. Jubal leaned forward. They must have done something wrong, he reasoned, or they would never have crossed the forbidden zone to reach his province. Hal reluctantly admitted that they had crossed it. Guilty. The gavel struck the desk. June sprang to her feet, but Jubal informed her that the law waited for no one. He found them guilty as charged and sentenced them to dinner in his home. The family stared at him. Naturally, Jubal added, they were free to refuse. The alternative to dinner was death. Phidias Jubal beamed at them as though he had just extended the most generous invitation imaginable. Chapter 2. The Trophy Room. Jubal's mansion was grand, ornate and unsettlingly quiet. At the sound of the front door, a beautiful young woman entered the hall. She carried herself with the same extravagant self-importance as Jubal. "This is my wife Eva," he said. Eva studied the family with open delight. Her gaze stopped at Smith. "That one's too small." Smith moved closer to June. "Too small for what?" June asked. Eva merely wondered aloud whether their guests were hungry. They were led to a dining room, where a banquet of absurd proportions waited. Fruit and condiments crowded the table, and each person had an enormous roasted bird set before them. Hunger overcame suspicion enough for the family to eat, although a thin black barrel mounted before Jubal tracked every sudden movement. When Hal demanded an explanation, Jubal demonstrated the device by firing a narrow beam that lit a candle. "Please eat. Enjoy yourselves. Relax." But no sudden movements. Trace murmured that it looked like a last meal. Ava sat beside Gina and admired her hair, stroking it before asking, with a sudden hardening of her smile, whether it was natural or had been taken from someone else. Jubal apologized for his wife. Ava liked pretty things, he explained, and he liked to indulge her. She was his 13th wife, and a considerable improvement on the 12th, who had apparently been boring. Conversation revealed that the entire province had been given to Jubal by his cousin, the leader in Emar. Jubal had modestly named it Phidias Jubal Gardens. A small support community supplied his needs, but the central estate belonged to Jubal and Eva alone. They did, Eva added, receive guests. Most remained for quite a while. After dinner, the Sterlings discovered what she meant. The trophy room contained fantastic animals mounted on the walls, including creatures with 2 heads and beasts that seemed impossible even by Otherworld standards. But the most disturbing trophies were human. Men and women stood encased in translucent shells, stacked in rows along one wall. On the front of each shell was a small glass chamber filled with mist and an eerie blue glow. Within the glow hovered something that resembled a human presence separated from its body. June asked whether the prisoners were conscious. Eva smiled. "We like to think so." Jubal took down 2 compact black devices. He called them beaten matter converters, his own design. The technology, he said, separated a living person into physical body and soul. It could also reverse the process, although Jubal rarely bothered. He had grown fond of his guests in their present form. Hal asked if this was the fate of everyone who visited. "Only those who lost," Jubal replied. "Lost what?" "His game." Jubal proudly described himself as the greatest competitor in all the provinces of Emar. Anyone who played against him and lost became a trophy. Hal refused. Whatever Jubal imagined, the Sterlings were not going to play. Trace added that they would make poor trophies. Jubal disagreed. The game had begun the moment they broke the laws of his province. Law, after all, was the most serious game of all. Jubal had merely put the fun back into it. Hal moved towards him. Eva raised her matter converter. It would be a shame to lose before the game even got interesting. A sharp electronic signal interrupted them. Jubal seemed delighted. Visitors were almost unheard of. A projection appeared on the wall. Commander Kroll stood outside the gates with his zone troopers. The sight of him silenced the Sterlings. Jubal noticed. Kroll announced that he was pursuing 5 fugitives who must have crossed Jubal's land. Jubal muted the connection and turned to his guests. He did not know why Kroll wanted them, he said, and did not care. But the situation offered a fascinating choice. They could leave with Kroll, or they could compete with Jubal. Hal looked at June and the children. There was no real choice at all. "All right," he said. "We'll play your game." Jubal's face lit with delight. He told Kroll that the people he sought were not there, and ordered him to leave. Outside, Kroll did not believe a word of it. When a stone thrown through the gate vanished in an electrical field, he decided against forcing an entrance that night. He would find another way in after daylight. Inside the trophy room, Ava fastened red and black bracelets around the wrists of Hal, June, Gina, and Trace. Each bracelet carried 3 yellow lights and placed a corresponding point on Jubal's map of the province. She reached for Smith. "Not that one," Jubal said. The game, he explained, had 3 stages. The first tested intellect. The second tested emotion. The third tested physical ability. Fail once, and they lost everything. Survive all 3, and they would be free. Then Jubal observed that the Sterlings possessed an unusually strong emotional bond. Escape might not be enough to inspire their best performance. They required a prize of greater value. Before anyone could move, he aimed the matter converter at Smith. Light filled the room. Where Smith had been standing, there was now another translucent trophy. June cried out and rushed forward, but Hal caught her. Jubal assured them that the small man was entirely safe. All you must do to get him back is win. Chapter 3. The Path of Perplexity. Morning found the remaining Sterlings in a bare white holding room. None had slept. June's grief had hardened into anger, and when Jubal and Ava entered, she demanded her son back. Jubal behaved as though they were discussing the weather. It had rained during the night, he said, but he had inspected the playing fields, and everything remained in excellent condition. Hal warned him that if Smith had been harmed, there would be consequences. Jubal was offended by the suggestion. He had no interest in damaged trophies, refused to play, however, and all 4 Sterlings would join Smith. He unfolded a map. The first day would test intellect. Their objective was the House of Emotion, which they had to reach before nightfall by following yellow markings along Jubal's path of perplexity. Obstacles would block the way. Correct solutions would allow them to continue. Wrong answers could kill them. The first test, Jubal said, was simply to leave the room. He and Ava departed. The metal door sealed behind them. Panels opened on either side. One displayed green and orange squares beside an empty space. The other contained 4 colored buttons: blue, red, yellow, and black. Then the walls began moving inward. A clue on the map instructed them to complete the series. Trace guessed black and accidentally touched the button. The walls accelerated. Blue electricity crawled across their surfaces. Gina rounded on her brother, but there was no time for blame. Hal called out colors, searching desperately for a pattern. Green, orange, red. Then he saw it. All 3 words contained the letter R. He struck the red button. The door opened just before the electrified walls reached them. They ran into a bright corridor with a yellow floor. Relief lasted only seconds. Gina accused Trace of nearly getting them killed. Trace insisted it had been an accident. Hal stepped between them. Fighting among themselves, he said, was exactly what would prevent them reaching Smith. The map's next instruction was straightforward by Jubal's standards. Remain on the yellow path. Trace tested the warning by holding a foot above a neighboring corridor. Where his shadow crossed the boundary, an ominous blue glow appeared. Gina dragged him back, and another argument began. Hal stopped it before it could grow. They were tired, frightened and angry, but they had only one way forward. They had to work together. Somewhere behind them, Kroll was also entering Jubal's private game wood. An old vine-covered gate provided a route around the electrical barrier. When snarling dogs seemed to charge from the bushes, Kroll forced his frightened men to stand their ground. The dogs vanished. Phantom animals, he told them, had no teeth. Jubal's province, it appeared, was filled with games, whether the visitors had agreed to play them or not. Chapter 4. The Grid of Geometric Indulgence. The yellow path eventually brought the Sterlings into an enormous chamber filled with humming machinery. Pipes, cables, and glowing mechanisms climbed towards a ceiling so high that it vanished into shadow. Across the floor lay a 5x5 grid of illuminated white squares. A door waited on the far side. Gina tossed a hair barrette onto the grid. A beam shot from above and burned it instantly. The clue on the map was uselessly grand. The Grid of Geometric Indulgence was described as a perfect nonplus and baffle to human understanding. Trace found a metal plate in the wall. At first its symbols seemed meaningless. A figure 2, a circle, divided by a line, another matching line beneath it. June suddenly realized that what looked like a plus sign was meant as a cross. To cross, Hal said. Then he understood the rest. The circle and its diameter represented pi 3.14159. The digits were the route across the grid. June gave him a brush from her purse. Hal dropped it onto the 3rd square of the first row. The row went dark. Safe. He stepped onto it. First row, 3rd square. 2nd row first. 3rd row, Fourth row first. Then Hal stopped. The next digit should have been 6. But each row contained only 5 squares. Before anyone could decide what that meant, Trace jumped completely over the final row and landed safely on the far side. The last row was a trick. Gina called it a lucky guess, but this time there was relief behind the insult. One by one, the others crossed, and the far door opened. In the trophy room, Jubal and Ava watched 4 points of light begin moving again. They had expected the family to fail. Jubal seemed disappointed. Ava seemed almost offended. Meanwhile, Kroll's progress through the gamewood was considerably less dignified. He fell into a concealed pit, whose wall displayed Jubal's grinning face, while an electronic laugh mocked him. Later, a barren tree appeared to each zone trooper as his favorite fruit. Kroll recognized a cerebral feedback illusion before anyone ate from it. The device made each observer see whatever he most wanted to see. He warned his men that Jubal had once used such illusions to interrogate prisoners during the Fourth Unification War. That knowledge did nothing to improve Kroll's temper. Chapter 5. The Dilemma of Duality. By dusk, the Sterlings were exhausted, but the House of Emotion was still ahead. The yellow path divided in two. Walls of fire sprang up across both routes, filling the air with heat and a deafening roar. 2 electronic idols guarded the fork. June read the clue. One path was blocked by real fire and would kill them. The other was an illusion. One idol always spoke truth, and the other always lied. They could ask only one idol a single question. Then an electronic warning announced that they had 30 seconds. Hal knew the problem. He had encountered a version of it years earlier. But remembering a classroom puzzle while flames thundered a few feet away was another matter. At last, he faced one idol. If I asked the other idol which path was safe, what would he answer? The idol indicated the path on the right. Hal immediately chose the left. Trace protested, but Hal told him to trust him. They joined hands and advanced towards the flames. The heat felt real. The noise was overwhelming. At the last moment, every instinct told them to stop. Hal pulled them forward. They passed through harmless light. Behind the false flames, the air was cool and silent. Hal explained, "Ask the liar what the truthful idol would say, and the liar would give the wrong answer. Ask the truthful idol what the liar would say, and he would truthfully report the wrong answer. Either way, the answer had to be reversed." Trace grinned. Even Gina looked impressed. Around the next bend, they saw the House of Emotion. It stood on a hill in the evening mist, a strange mixture of Victorian mansion and Otherworld technology. Glass domes rose from the roof. Leaded windows formed unfamiliar patterns. A bronze tower caught the last light of day. They had reached it before sunset. Far behind them, Kroll decided that the gamewood was too dangerous to cross in darkness. One of his men was already hanging upside down from another of Jubal's traps. Kroll ordered camp made for the night. The twin moons rose above the trees. For the first time that day, the Sterlings had gained a little distance from both of the men hunting them. Chapter 6. The House of Emotion. Inside, the House of Emotion looked unexpectedly comfortable. Wood-paneled walls, tapestries, and paintings surrounded a warm fire. For a few moments, it resembled a home. Then Gina discovered the food. A table stood covered with everything the hungry family could have wanted. They had eaten nothing all day. Hal stopped them. The food might be poisoned, or part of the test. Trace asked whether starving counted as an emotion. Nobody laughed. Jubal's voice came from hidden speakers. He congratulated them on surviving the games of intellect. One yellow light vanished from each bracelet. 2 remained. The second challenge was simple. They had to remain inside the House of Emotion until dawn. Leave for any reason, and they would lose. Hal tried to bargain. Jubal could keep him in the game, he said, but should release June, Gina, and Trace. They only slowed him down. June immediately understood what he was trying to do and held her protest. Ava did not. She seized Jubal's microphone and mocked Hal's attempt to protect his family. Caring so much, she said, was weakness. It could ruin everything. Jubal ended. device producing the effect and opened it. Pleased that one of Jubal's tricks had been so easily defeated, a ghostly hand rose from the box. The lights went out. Vaporous figures filled the room, pointing at them and ordering them to leave. One turned directly towards Gina and told her she would die if she remained. Then the lights returned, and the figures vanished. Hal insisted it was an illusion. That was the only explanation that mattered. Jubal wanted them frightened enough to run outside. Later, they slept together near the fireplace while Hal kept watch. He read from the Book of Emar and found a brief reference to their host. During the Fourth Unification War, Phidias Jubal had been known as Judge Jubal, the Relentless, infamous for his attacks on the underground movement. It explained some things without making Jubal any less strange. A knock sounded at the door. Hal woke the others. Another knock came, louder. The door flew open. Beyond it was Los Angeles. Not an approximation, not something merely similar. Their own neighborhood seemed to lie outside the house of emotion beneath familiar daylight. Neighbors they knew appeared. Mr. Mandel invited them to a barbecue as though the Sterlings had simply been away for a few days. Then Sean appeared. Gina stared at the boy she had known before Otherworld. He told her he had missed her and held out his arms. Trace could hardly breathe. "This might be it," he said. "This might be the way home." Perhaps they did not need to find Emar at all. He moved towards the door. Hal caught him. Gina asked the question they were all thinking. What if it was real? June answered it. They could not leave without Smith. Hal slammed the door. Trace pulled it open again. Los Angeles had vanished. There was only darkness outside. Trace was devastated. He had wanted it to be real. They all had. That was precisely the point. Jubal had warned them. What they wished for most could destroy them. Hal reasoned that the house was drawing images from their own minds, just as Kroll's illusion devices elsewhere on the estate drew out personal desires. Jubal did not need to know what Los Angeles looked like. The Sterlings themselves had supplied every detail. Gina said quietly that it was the worst thing Jubal could have done to them. June led them away from the door. Hal put his arms around his family. They would get home one day, he promised. But first, they had to survive the night. Chapter 7. The Hunt? Sunrise found them huddled around the dying fire. Trace looked through the curtains and announced that morning had come. A second light went out on their bracelets. Only one remained. Jubal and Eva arrived dressed for a country hunt. Jubal carried an elegant bow and a quiver of arrows. They looked absurdly fresh beside the exhausted Sterlings. Hal told him the game was over. Jubal calmly replied that if Hal chose to stop, the family would simply join Smith in the trophy room. Rules could not be obeyed only when convenient. That would mean chaos. Eva noticed that the banquet remained untouched. She selected a piece of fruit and bit into it. Gina groaned with hunger. The final test, Jubal announced, was physical ability. 6 miles of game wood lay between the Sterlings and the provincial boundary. They could travel by any route they wished. Jubal would give them an hour's head start. Then he and Eva would hunt them. If the family reached the border first, they won. Hal asked the obvious question. How could they recover Smith after leaving Jubal's province? Jubal said they could discuss that when or if they escaped. Eva turned an hourglass. The head start had begun. Outside, June asked whether Hal believed Jubal would ever return Smith voluntarily. Not for a moment. Hal studied the map. Then he pointed back towards the mansion. They were not going to the border. They were going to get their son. Without the restriction of the yellow path, they could cut directly across the estate and reach the mansion quickly. For the first time since the game began, they were no longer following Jubal's plan. Kroll, meanwhile, had found the House of Emotion. His lieutenant had also found one of Jubal's net traps in the most literal possible fashion. While the troopers lowered him from the tree, Kroll devised a use for the trap. The Sterlings hurried across the estate. Gina twisted her foot, then caught another tripwire. A volley of small stones shot over her as she fell. She broke down. They would never make it. Jubal was going to kill them. June pointed at the harmless pebbles scattered on the ground. Hal finally understood something important about the game wood. Jubal's traps frightened, delayed, and confused. They were dangerous. But Jubal did not truly want his prey dead. Trace understood why. He wants us as trophies. Gina, still shaken, asked what difference that made. It made enough. Jubal needed them alive, and that gave them a chance. Back at the House of Emotion, Jubal's tracking device showed the 4 lights moving towards his mansion rather than the boundary. Eva was delighted. She had predicted that they would return for Smith. Jubal suggested intercepting them. Eva preferred to let the Sterlings reach the trophy room. A little taste of victory, she said, would make their eventual defeat more satisfying. Jubal gazed at her adoringly. Outside, he and Eva set off after their prey. They did not see the net until it snapped around them and hauled them into the air. Kroll stepped from the trees. Judge Jubal had finally fallen into one of his own traps. Chapter 8. The trophy. Jubal's outrage was magnificent. Suspended in the net beside Eva, he began denouncing the violation of his property until Kroll spun him around and let him come face to face with a bioruptor. Jubal immediately lowered his voice. Kroll crushed Jubal's tracking device beneath his boot. He was tired of pits, stones, illusions, and traps. He wanted the fugitives, and Jubal was going to take him directly to them. Jubal threatened to complain to his cousin, the leader. Kroll was unimpressed. The leader, he said, regarded Jubal as an embarrassment. Eva decided that Kroll's argument was convincing. They would cooperate. While the zone troopers released them, the Sterlings reached the mansion. They burst into the trophy room and locked the door. Eva's little dog watched them without much interest. Hal found the light key used for their bracelets and removed his own. Trace began unlocking the others. Hal took down one of the matter converters. Jubal had said it worked both ways. June moved along the rows of imprisoned people, desperately searching for Smith. He was not among them. Then Gina found a curtained alcove. Behind it were 5 empty trophy shells waiting on display. 4 were empty. The 5th contained Smith. Trace looked at the vacant shells and understood. Those had been prepared for the rest of the family. Hal brought the matter converter to Smith's prison. He did not pretend to know exactly what he was doing. He remembered Jubal's demonstration, turned the control in the opposite direction, and activated the device. The mist drained from the glass chamber. The translucent material surrounding Smith softened. A small hand pushed through. The family tore away the remaining layers and pulled him free. June swept him into her arms. Smith looked from one tearful face to another. "What's going on? Did we win?" "Not yet," Hal said, "but almost." He had a plan. They had removed the bracelets, but the bracelets themselves still appeared on Jubal's tracking system. If they could make the lights move away from the mansion, Kroll and Jubal might follow them. The family worked quickly. There was one more thing Hal refused to leave undone. The other trophies had been prisoners too. Using the converter, the Sterlings began releasing them. One by one, the strange collection of men and women returned to life, bewildered and weak but free. There was no time for explanations. Hal hid the family and the liberated prisoners behind the velvet curtain. Then they waited. Chapter 9. Judgment. Kroll marched Jubal and Eva through their own dining room at gunpoint. Jubal asked whether the commander might be persuaded to put away his weapon while inside the house. Kroll said no. Eva directed him towards the trophy room. The door opened. The room appeared empty. More shocking to Jubal, the floor was littered with discarded translucent shells. His trophies were gone. For the first time the Sterlings had seen him, Phidias Jubal ceased to be amusingly eccentric and simply lost control. "Years of collecting," he cried. "Years." Kroll demanded to know where the fugitives were. Jubal blamed him. If Kroll had not delayed them with the net trap, Jubal would have caught the Sterlings himself. Eva called Kroll vile and disgusting. Jubal snatched up a matter converter and declared that he would begin rebuilding his collection with Kroll. He was too angry to aim properly. Kroll took the unfamiliar device from him. Jubal's expression changed instantly. No, I didn't mean it." Kroll examined the converter, shrugged, and pressed the control. A burst of energy filled the room. Judge Phidias Jubal fell backwards inside a translucent trophy shell. Eva stared at her husband. Then she looked at Kroll. Her manner changed completely. Perhaps, she suggested, he was not so disgusting after all. Perhaps he might like to remain with her. The entire province could be theirs. She stepped close and kissed him. Kroll activated the converter again. Eva disappeared from his arms and reappeared encased beside Jubal. Kroll wiped his mouth with his sleeve. His lieutenant called his attention to the great tracking map. 5 lights were moving rapidly away from the mansion towards the Gamewood. Kroll had no idea how the fugitives could move so quickly, but he knew what the lights had to mean. He and his troopers ran from the room. Silence returned. After several seconds, the velvet curtain moved. Hal looked out. Kroll was gone. The Sterlings emerged with the people they had freed. Outside, Eva's small dog raced happily through the Gamewood. 5 red and black bracelets bounced from its collar. For once, Jubal's tracking system was working perfectly. It was simply tracking the wrong fugitives. Chapter 10. The Road Ahead. Before leaving, the Sterlings stood for a moment in the trophy room. Jubal and Eva were now displayed exactly as their victims had been displayed. Hal had no desire to decide how long they deserved to remain there. That was no longer his problem. The important thing was that Smith stood beside them again, and the prisoners Jubal had collected were free. There was also the matter of getting out of Phidias Jubal Gardens. The access crystal from the mansion disabled the electrical field at the front gate. Hal inserted it into the control box, and the glowing posts on either side went dark. Gina picked up a stone. After everything they had experienced, nobody questioned the precaution. She threw it through the gate. The stone landed safely on the other side. The family crossed. Behind them lay Jubal's mansion, his impossible games, the House of Emotion, and the Gamewood. Somewhere in the distance, Kroll and his men were pursuing a small dog wearing 5 bracelets. Ahead lay the Forbidden Zone. They were tired. Gina's ankle hurt. They had eaten too little and slept even less, yet Smith was with them. And for the moment, Kroll was not. That was enough. Later, Hal would remember Jubal's province for more than its cruelty and absurdity. The games had been designed to expose weakness, failures of thought, failures of courage, failures of endurance. Jubal had expected the Sterlings to break apart under pressure. Instead, each challenge had reminded them of the thing he understood least. They were stronger together. Hal's knowledge had helped them cross the grid. Trace's reckless courage had solved its final trick. At the fork in the road, the family had trusted Hal when every sense told them to turn back. In the House of Emotion, June's refusal to abandon Smith had broken the illusion of home. Gina had found Smith when they reached the trophy room, and all of them had chosen to return for him when simple escape lay in the opposite direction. Jubal had tried to turn their love for one another into a weakness. It had been the reason they won. The access crystal had given them freedom from one province, but Hal knew that their real journey was unfinished. Somewhere ahead was Emar. Beyond that, if they were fortunate, lay a road back to Earth. How much farther would they have to travel? Hal had no answer. There was only the road ahead. Together, the Sterlings walked on.